Sixtos, quit farting. All right, guys, area of parallelograms and triangles. This is 10.1, our first section in chapter 10. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is the properties of parallelograms. Properties of parallelograms. I can't really make it any bigger, that screen, so hopefully you can see that from here or from where you're sitting. All right, so properties of parallelograms. I'm going to go ahead and draw a parallelogram. And if you remember about parallelograms, there was 5 things from in first semester that we talked about. The first one is that the opposite sides are parallel. So the opposite sides are parallel. Both pairs of opposite sides. The opposite sides are also congruent. All right, so I guess I should use a different color here. Let's use orange. So they're parallel with the arrows indicating they're parallel. Now we're going to do the dashes to show you that they're congruent. So opposite sides are congruent and parallel. Thumbs up, thumbs down. This sounds vaguely familiar. Okay. You can't see their thumbs, but they're up. Okay. So the other thing is that consecutive angles are supplementary. Meaning this angle and this angle are supplementary, adding to 180. Another little detail that you want to try to remember is that the opposite angles are congruent to each other. So these two angles, they're opposite each other. They'd also be congruent to each other. All right, so opposite angles are congruent to each other. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are congruent. So opposite angles are congruent. And the last one, diagonals bisect each other. So the diagonals bisect each other, meaning that if I connected those two corners, those two angles, and I connected those two, right where they cross, these two pieces would be equal to each other. And then those two pieces would be equal to each other. This piece and this piece are equal, and this piece and this piece are equal. Right, so that's just a little review on properties of parallelograms. Right, this one will also probably be a review for you. It's the area of a rectangle. All right, in the area of a rectangle, I switched to a purple pen. It's kind of hard to tell in this lighting because it's so dark. Your area would be equal to your base times your height. All right. You guys have probably are so used to hearing it as length times width. Well, now in geometry, we're going to call it base times height. And there's the little box for your rectangle. Right, so let's do an example trying to find these areas. Maybe I'm going too fast. Sorry if I am. So what I'm going to do is kind of going to look like a little city skyline here. So bear with me. All right, I'm going to tell you that this whole piece down here is 12. This height over here is 10. This height over here is 14. And this height right there is 11. Okay, so my tip to you when trying to solve for these is cut the figure into shapes of objects with areas you know how to find, and then add all the parts together. So, my little tip, cut the figures into shapes of figures you already know how to find the area. Cut the shape into smaller figures with areas you know how to solve. And add them together. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's cut them into smaller figures. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one into a figure. I'll cut that into a smaller figure. And then that into a smaller figure. So 1, 2, and 3. Those are my 3 figures. All right, figure 1, I know my height. What is my height, you guys? 14. So, figure 1, I'm going to do 14 times, what's my base? Oh, I forgot to give you a piece of information. What's my base? 3. So 14 times 3. And what are you guys going to get when you multiply 14 times 3? 42. All right, so that's figure 1. Let's do figure 2. Figure 2 is a little bit trickier. First of all, what's the height? What's this piece right here? How'd you get 3? We got 3 for the height, which is correct. And we got that by taking 14, this whole piece, minus 11. So 14 minus 11 is 3. And that's how we would get the height. Now we need to figure out what in the world our base is. What do you think, Lo?
6.
It is 6. How did you get 6?
I added 33 and then subtracted.
She took this 12 and she subtracted these 2 3s. 3 minus 6, or 12 minus 6 is 6. And 3 times 6 is 18. So the area of figure 2 is 18. Now we need figure 3, which is simply 3 times 10, which hopefully you guys know is 30. Now we're going to add all of these together, and we're going to get 90. I didn't give you a unit, whether it's centimeters or inches, so 90 units squared. Good-ish. Okay, so let's jump into area of a parallelogram then. So that was a rectangle. Oh, did I do the wrong one? Now let's move into area of a parallelogram. Ooh, these are going to be some long notes. It's already a long video. Okay, area of a parallelogram. is simply your base times your height. Alright, so area equals base times height. The big thing is about this is that you just need to make sure that your height is perpendicular with your base. See how that little 90-degree angle is right there? You need to make sure that your height and your base are perpendicular. The height must be perpendicular to the base. All right, so really quick. Oh, whoops, I forgot to highlight that in green. In green, let's do an example. Let's find the area of the parallelogram. Alright, so there's my parallelogram. What's my base? 10. My base is going to be 10. And which of these numbers is my height? 6. It has to be 6 because it has to be perpendicular with your base. So your area for this parallelogram would be 60 units squared. Alright, I'm going to pause it for a minute for you. Alright, so we're back and we are doing area of a triangle. And just plain and short of it, the area of a triangle is your base times your height, but don't forget you need to divide it by 2. And you also need to make sure that your height is perpendicular to your base. So that triangle, it must be perpendicular to your base. For this type of triangle, you're a little lucky because it's a right triangle, so you know that your height is already perpendicular to your base. This type of triangle would be a little different. Your height would be outside of the triangle. So here's some triangles. This would be your height. This would be your height. Right here, height. All right, so don't forget the height must be perpendicular to the base. Height must be perpendicular to the base. And this is blurry and hard to read, so I'm definitely going to need to redo this video at some point. And there it is in its green box. And that is it.